And before we begin our work session for this evening, which is with our Arlington County General Assembly delegation, I'd like to move that the members of the County Board certify that at the just concluded closed session, that one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under Chapter 37, Title 2.2 of the Code of Virginia, and that two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Vice Chair Garvey. Will our clerk please call the roll of board members?
Mr. Dorsey?
Yes.
Ms. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Carantonis?
Yes.
Mr. DeFerranti?
Yes.
Ms. Talento?
Yes.
Thank you. And with that, I'm now pleased to call this work session to order. And this is our annual opportunity to have conversation with our General Assembly delegation to discuss their legislative priorities for the upcoming legislative session, as well as the priorities that have been put out from Arlington County as part of our legislative package, which we will consider adopting soon, and to discuss any and all issues that are going to be apparent during the upcoming session. Now, of course, tonight we have with it the impacts of redistricting in Arlington. So there are some new seats at the table, and there are also some newly designed districts that our delegation represents. To give you a sense of who is in the room, although people will introduce themselves later, in addition to members of the county board, we have Senator Favola representing the 40th Senate District. We will soon be joined in person by Delegate Alfonso Lopez representing the 3rd House District. And then we also have joining us remotely newly elected member-elect Delegate Adele McClure from the 2nd District. And we also have Senator Adam Eben from the 39th Senate District. And also participating remotely for medical reasons is board member Tanya Talento. So with that, I'll just begin with an overall little bit of an orientation as to where we are with the district. If Ms. Jacobs will pull up a brief PowerPoint presentation with a few slides to orient anyone to the changes that we're experiencing. If we can move to the next one. So of course we had Delegate Rip Sullivan and Elizabeth Bennett Parker. They no longer represent any precincts in Arlington County. Redistricting brought with it a tighter drawing of districts. And if you'll look at the map that is located on the left, those are our current boundaries. And if you could see, you know, if those of you can make out Arlington County to the very left of Washington, D.C., we now have 3 districts in the House. The northernmost one is represented by Delegate Patrick Hope, who unfortunately cannot be with us tonight. The one directly below that, but to the east, is the new House District 2, represented by Adele McClure. And then the third one, immediately to the west, adjoining hers, is House District 3, represented by Alfonso Lopez. And you can see on the right, that's the new District 2 outline in black. We can move to the next slide. The Senate, a little less complicated. We did have the retirement of Senator Janet Howell, who had a portion of Arlington County. And remaining, we have Senators Eben and Favola, whose districts are similar to what they represented before, at least in terms of the impact in Arlington. And what it looks like, if we actually go back to the previous slide of the House districts, Delegate Hope has 21 districts. All of them are in Arlington. Delegate McClure, Delegate-elect McClure, has 19 districts in Arlington, and one of which is split with Delegate Lopez, who has 14 districts in Arlington, as well as 4 in Alexandria.
Yeah, you mean precincts?
Precincts, sorry, what did I say? Districts?
Districts.
Thank you.
That's all right. But we split precinct and.
So there's one split precinct that is shared by Delegate-elect McClure and Delegate Lopez. All right, is that?
The Senate, I give up.
It's on.
It's a,
Someone has read, yeah, you're good.
Put it back on. When this is
Perfect.
okay, in the Senate, I give up 22 precincts that were in the western part of my district. They were either in Fairfax or Loudoun County. And those 22 precincts are now all in Arlington. So my entire Senate district is contained within Arlington. I guess I have 95% of Arlington, and Adam Evan has 5 precincts in Arlington.
You've come back home.
I've come back
There we
home,
go.
yeah.
We've come back home, indeed.
It's a
But
comfortable.
those 5 but mighty precincts that are retained by Senator Eben, I know you're thrilled to have those, and we appreciate you both being able to join us tonight. So what we're going to do is, at this meeting, have an opportunity for us to present our legislative package to you. We'll try to do so quickly and efficiently, knowing that all of you have perspicaciously read it in advance. And then we would love to hear your priorities as well, and then have some discussion and conversation about how we can mutually support each other. So with that, if that's okay with everyone, I'll begin. Our legislative package does contain some overarching principles that we are going to really apply to all of our efforts during the upcoming session. And the first of which, workforce resiliency, is really to give us an opportunity to deal with some of the existential challenges that we face as a major employer and providing services to our constituents, particularly in areas like public safety or with mental health clinicians or childcare workers. These are areas where we have acute shortages in the county, also are experienced statewide as well as nationally. And as we think about processes that could really streamline opportunities to fill these positions without diminishing standards, but creating more efficiencies in terms of being able to recruit these folks, onboard them, and incentives to really attract them to this work are really important to us. And really getting out of this whole idea that we compete with all other jurisdictions for these critical personnel. We really need to have every boat lifted with everybody's needs in these areas being able to be met. The second principle is really making sure that the state is able to fully fund commitments to local governments and to do so before undertaking new funding priorities. We recognize that with the complexities of state government, there are sometimes unintended and unanticipated consequences. That is certainly understandable, but we hope as we find those things that we are able to make sure that localities are fully being resourced for the responsibilities that they take on. And then something that with various wording is in all of our legislative packages, respect for local authority and making sure that especially when it comes to impacts that will affect Arlington County uniquely or specifically, that they are done so with the support of Arlington County and not in a vacuum as a way of exercising any control over our locality. So those principles undergird everything that we're interested in, but then we'd like to just go through and touch on some of the other priorities in each of the priority areas. One caveat for those following at home: just because it's not listed here doesn't mean we don't think it's important. These items in the legislative package are there either because of some sense of urgency or an opportunity with the upcoming session. We believe it's appropriate to spend extra attention on these, but this is not an exhaustive list of everything that we think is important, nor does the numbering indicate any greater priority of any one over the other. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Vice Chair Garvey to cover much of the human services section.
Thank you very much. And then Senator Favola, it's lovely to have you here with us in this room. Thank you for
Thank you,
being
Ms.
here.
Garvey.
It's a chilly night out, and I'm glad other people can join us online. Actually, I'll just sort of point out that a number of delegates and senators are participating virtually, and there's a whole lot of legislation that we encourage allowing us to do the same, and this is just, it makes a clear point. It's really better to be able to do that. It's convenient, handles it, as Ms. Talento needed to be home for medical reasons. I mean, there are all kind of reasons, and I think we ought to be able to do more of that. I think that may be in here, but in case it's
Concur.
not, thank you, I bet
in
you do.
another section, but
I'm going to just go with it, because I'm...
allowed me not to cover it, so go for it.
Okay, exactly, so that's, I'm sorry, but you can say it again, because some of these things bear repeating, so thank you. And thank you, Ms. Cranen, for putting this all together. I'll just go, human services, I think, I mean, I think certainly, Senator Favolo, you know this well. I mean, you've been living this and working on this for many, many years. So, and it kind of boils down to very similar things. One of the major areas is mental health crisis intervention. As you know, we're doing a lot with intervention teams that helps divert people from jails, and it gives them better outcomes. It's cheaper and less expensive for us, so it's like a win-win-win. And there are a number of things that we could use, which is certainly helping with staffing support, because it's really hard to get the staffing that we need. And apparently, included with, now that we're doing things differently, the legislation needs to catch up. So an authorization to maintain the stock supply of controlled medications at the facilities that we're doing, the newer ones, that are like the mobile units. Also, as I said, this reduces the burden on our law enforcement, and it really helps a lot. And also deals with the fact that we don't have enough hospital beds. Critical workforce shortages. There is a lot that can be done, and hopefully that will be done with paid internships, looking at perhaps some changes in clinical supervision hours, student loan repayment programs, scholarship programs, and I will say also, I understand from talking to folks that we've got somebody may come from out of state with their husband, like with the military or whatever, and they would like to work. They've worked before as a nurse or a clinician, and they can't because they haven't got the certification for the state of Virginia. They're perfectly good maybe in West Virginia or Ohio or California, and probably perfectly fine, but because they haven't done the exact certification here, they can't work, and we really need those people to be able to working with us. Increasing funding, particularly to account for the cost of inflation. I thought maybe around here I'll quote Billy Kiger, who was with Rockingham County. I think you knew him. He would always say, if the government doesn't fully fund its commitments, there's no surplus. And sometimes I think the state likes to say they have a surplus, but actually there are a lot of things that we're not being supported the way we need to be financially. So that goes certainly for behavioral health systems and keeping up with the cost of inflation with behavioral health and many things. I think that's the major, I don't think there's anything else new. I'll just touch on the infection prevention, just make sure that there's an adequate inventory of personal protective equipment. And we saw with the pandemic how important that is, and particularly with standards for long-term care. And that we need to have living wages, paid sick days, and good training, and make sure that the standards are such that people will stay healthier in our long-term care facilities. We really saw a lot of lacks of that during the pandemic. And you had something you wanted to add?
Well, I can comment on
Yeah,
a couple of
please.
your things.
Yep.
Just, I don't know how you want to structure the
That's probably a
meeting.
good
if you want
Let's
to-
not be so formal. If the
Just go.
spirit moves you, please go ahead.
Oh, okay, I was just going to say, Ms. Scarby, on the addressing critical work shortages, especially in your healthcare sector, you're probably aware that a few years ago, Virginia did agree to participate in that national network for mental health counselors. So under that rubric, if you're licensed in one state, you can also, there's a reciprocal agreement, you'd be licensed in other states. So that should facilitate individuals getting a Virginia license fairly quickly, so.
Thank you. I was not totally aware of that, and I had been told recently that this was still an issue, and it may not be, it may be with other different areas, not maybe specifically
Right,
with that
and
umbrella.
we're still working
Yeah.
on sort of reciprocal agreements when it comes to doctors, which is
Right.
a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
And then I can go into some other bills that are not directly right on what you just talked about, so I will wait on that. And in terms of the treatment in jails, last year I did put in a bill to actually, it was a grant program, not a mandate, but it would have been large enough for the jails to draw down money if they were to provide medically assisted detox, and then a treatment program, and then, of course, a plan when the offenders were released, so they would continue their treatment on the outside. It passed, but it didn't get funded. We believe the governor's going to put some money in. Under the opioid resettlement agreement, a large chunk of the money goes directly to the opioid authority, but about 15% of those dollars actually go to the general fund, but they have to be allocated for substance use disorder programs. So we're hoping that maybe this jail program that I would like to see funded will actually get funded. Governor Youngkin said he wanted to see a 20% reduction in opioid deaths. So the one critical way of doing that is to, deal with your captive audience, which happens to be, folks who are in our jails, nearly all of them have some kind of substance use disorder, so.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think our
So I
jails, I
would
mean,
like
that's
to
where
see
most
that
people get their
treatment.
mental health treatment all around this country, this nation. And we need to be, I think, treating the jails as much as we can as actually treatment facilities, because that's what's needed. Thank you.
And if I'm allowed to
Thank you for that.
chime in here.
Sure, please, Ms. McClure.
Awesome, thank you. So this is substance use disorder, and addressing that and mental health is a huge priority of mine. So definitely wanted to sign on to what Senator Favola mentioned, but then also address a specific piece of legislation that you mentioned. It was mentioned that there was a priority in allowing virtual participation, and I'm a longtime former member of the Arlington Community Services Board, as well as a current member of the Commission on Aging. And this is a really important issue to folks with disabilities, health issues, and other personal matters to be able to participate in their local boards and commissions. So it's something that is deeply important to me. And I know that Delegate Elizabeth Bennett Parker is planning to put this bill in again, and I agreed to be a chief co-patron on that bill.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
I do want to elaborate on that. What that bill does is, it came through the Disability Commission, which I chair, and I will carry the bill in the Senate. But it goes beyond what our current law provides for virtual participation. So if you have a disability or you're a caretaker of an individual with a disability, you may be able to participate virtually, be counted towards the quorum, and have your voice counted in the vote. So it really is a huge step forward in terms of, I think, providing equity for individuals who would otherwise be challenged to come in person.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair Garvey.
Thank you, Delegate
And
McClure, for bringing that up.
for those participating virtually, if at any point you want to be recognized, just so I can know it in advance and not wait until everyone else has had an opportunity to speak, if you could use the raise hands function on Teams, I'll be sure to note it. Next, to cover items 9 through 12 in this section, Mr. DeFerranti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to thank you to Ms. Creenan and Senator Favola and Delegate Lopez, as well as Delegate-elect McClure. It's great to get to say that, and also to have your leadership and you here tonight. Senator Eben as well, really appreciate your continued leadership. The priorities that I'll cover are ones that are familiar. I feel your expertise is a huge resource for us. Childcare first. We advocate for increasing the childcare subsidy program, and then some administrative and burden reduction, and then also increasing reimbursement rates. We have done a fair bit. Former board member Crystal certainly has led on that, but it is an issue that all on the board care quite a bit about, and our community cares quite a bit about, and I'm about to care a lot about personally. So I know that there's a lot of work there, and just grateful for your representation, as well as your leadership, Ms. Greenan, in working to get what we can on childcare this year. Medicaid expansion, the pandemic, vast expansions, and so we have nationally a contraction of Medicaid eligibility, and so making sure that we get continued funding for local costs associated with Medicaid, is the second of the priorities. Food security, this is a bill that Delegate Bennett Parker, I think, is introducing. I was an advocate on the federal level for SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, but serving our older adults, we've been seeing more at risk of homelessness. So that priority is certainly one that I know you'll support. And if you have ways in which you can work with Delegate Bennett Parker on that or in the Senate, we'd appreciate that. And then the last of the priorities is with respect to block grant for TANF and maintain funding to our county for both Healthy Families and community action agencies. Community action agencies do so much. I'm a little less familiar personally with Healthy Families, but those are all the sort of values that you know from your time serving on the county board, and you all know from your time representing Arlington, that won't surprise you, but are very important to us, and happy to take questions. I don't think they're particularly There will be, I'm sure, a ton of nuance as you work through these issues, but those are the four that I wanted to start by presenting.
I just want to speak on the childcare issue. I'm going to work to continue the expansion of our subsidy program so we can serve individuals earning up to 80% of Virginia's median income rather than just at the 60%. And I encourage everybody to support Senator Kane's bill in the Senate, which actually would allow individuals to cap their childcare costs at no more than 7% of their gross income, which I guess you'd get a tax credit for the remaining dollars or whatever, but it's definitely on the right track. We will do our best. We're, of course, suffering from lack of federal funding right now. We've one of the few states that has actually spent our federal money. We have a little bit left, but not a lot. Medicaid expansion, we're unrolling that, as you know, because the Federal Emergency Act ended. So the extra dollars we were getting to pick up an additional 200,000 folks on Medicaid, that's ended. So these folks we do have a navigator. We're contacting everybody who has to everybody has to re-enroll in Medicaid, whether you were in expansion or the Medicaid program. So I expect some folks will be at risk of falling through the cracks. We're going to try to ensure that our uninsured population does not grow as a result of the unrolling. I think the food security is an excellent move because we do get federal money to cover the administrative costs. So we'll see what we can do in the budget. That would be a budget amendment. And we hear you on the TANF. We're a little nervous because the TANF dollars used to be more robust, but we have had some growth in TANF rolls, and we want to make sure we have enough money for those actually receiving the TANF benefits. But you are correct. There are a number of discretionary programs that we have funded with TANF, and the community action programs were one of them, as was, the Northern Virginia Family Services and a bunch of other programs were funded that way.
Thank you.
Just to add briefly to that, so Arlington County, like you mentioned, there's many nonprofits like NBFS that do get money. Arlington County in these specific programs, Healthy Families and Community Action Agencies actually receive dollars for that, in addition to all the nonprofits around that do. And so we're just really hoping that that money can be protected in this budget.
You and a number of other nonprofits.
Delegate Lopez.
No, I was just going to say that we've had a real problem, especially prior to 2020, with actually taking advantage of all of the TANF funding or temporary assistance for needy family funding, where it was used as a cudgel against folks who had maybe someone in the family, in the immediate family, who was a felon. And so what you're actually doing is you're harming children who are not at fault because of the actions of a parent. And so there are small things like that around the state code that we definitely need to be addressing that are causing more harm than necessarily.
Terrific.
Thank you. And
We did get that through. It took 4 years. I kept carrying that bill to allow individual family members, when they were released from jail, to be able to, their families to be able to apply. Do you remember the reentry programs?
I do. Yeah.
And actually, Republican Governor McDonald had allowed SNAP to be used for reentry purposes, but we had a hard time getting TANF in that same position. We did. Took a moment.
great, thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move to Ms. Talento to discuss our land use and housing section.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you I'm so excited that I can participate virtually. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person. It's really great to work with Senator Favola and Senator Evan and Delegate Alfonso and Delegate Adele McClure in this capacity. I'm so excited to be here in this temporary role. I want to talk to you a little bit about our land use and housing requests. We really believe that we should have the authority of local governments protected in regards to our planning, zoning, regulations, et cetera. When making decisions, we believe that it should be at the local level. And so we hope that you will honor that and work on ensuring that you're protecting the authority of local governments to make those decisions. We believe it's very important to recognize that local elected officials really understand what's happening in their communities and the impacts of some of these policies, the intricacies of each community, especially in Northern Virginia, but in particular Arlington, the way that our community is laid out and how we are managing our tax revenues, et cetera. So I think local zoning authority and enforcing land use regulations really should be at the local level, and we hope that you all will honor that as you move forward in this General Assembly session. The next one is the Housing Trust Fund. I know that a few of you have been champions on ensuring that Housing Trust Fund is in existence and it's supporting investments in affordable housing. But as you all know, housing is a big challenge in Northern Virginia, and in particular Arlington. Arlington is no exception and is a really hard-hit area in making sure affordable housing is existing. We have a lot of work that we've done at the local level, but the funding is not there, and that's the challenge that we continue to experience. So anything that you all can do to support a significant increase and a sustainable source of funding to the Housing Trust Fund would be great. Tenant rights and eviction prevention, again, you all have heard the issues that we've had here locally. It would be so great to have some policy, some legislation put forward that can help enforce tenant rights. We've all gone to places where we're seeing the challenges where our tenants can't fight the landlord issues that they're experiencing. And so really continue to push that to ensure that there's adequate health and safety conditions in all of our housing, and in particular affordable housing, programming, right to counsel, things of that nature, especially as we have so many vulnerable residents who are in eviction proceedings. We know that the eviction moratorium is no longer in force, and we are now starting to see an increase in evictions at the local level. So whatever y'all can do to support and put forth legislation for tenant rights and eviction prevention would be great. And finally, short-term rentals. Again, this sort of aligns with the first one, just maintaining the authority at the local level so we can regulate short-term rentals. When we're looking at our Airbnbs and where we're looking at registry rules for enforcement and tax collection purposes, it really should be with the local government, with county, ensuring that we understand the impacts to our revenue, the impacts to our residents, the impacts to our neighborhoods. We should have that authority to regulate the short-term rentals and rules on taxation and enforcement. So that's what we have on our housing and land use.
You want comments now, Mr. Chairman, on that? Or do you want to wait until we respond to all together?
Senator Evan, if you have a comment that you'd like to put out there now, please feel free.
Sure, just
So Senator Evan, we don't have a great connection with you right now.
I'm interested. One is an part last year to a plan for 10, a relatively small amount of rent rather than facing a few $100s and your rent is a few $1,000s. Okay, well, I'll wait till later then and see if it gets better.
Thank you. And we'll probably work with you. Maybe turning off your incoming video might help, or otherwise
wait and see if it
connect
gets better
with you via
later.
phone.
I do have a bill, and I don't think you're going to be that excited over it, but I might as well just tell you now. I'm working with a group that is making accessory dwelling units a by right part of your single-family land use code, which is okay. In other words, the way the language reads is there would only be a few minor requirements that a locality could place on an ADU. And you do it by ordinance. There would not be any approval process other than before the county board, which you don't have an approval process for ADUs before the board now, isn't it administrative?
They're administrative.
It's administrative now. I don't think it's going to cause you a lot of heartache, what we're trying to do. It's causing Fairfax a little bit. But, so
preliminary language was shared in the Virginia Association of Counties conference.
Yes, we've been working with Joe Lurch with
And-
Virginia Association of Counties.
It had a very lukewarm reception.
It had a very lukewarm. Yeah, you're being kind.
And I am being kind.
You're being kind, and I appreciate your professional.
What's your goal? Why are we doing?
Yeah,
Well,
that's
you
a
know,
great
there's
question.
several groups that really believe localities have not done enough to either house in-laws or individuals who may need housing, you know, to help with the workforce. It's an affordable housing mechanism.
That may or may not work and could cause havoc.
So if we could just say this, you know, Senator Favola, as you know
And we are
quite,
open to, let me just say that we are definitely open to any comments you may have or any amendments you may want to offer, but the group I'm working with is pretty adamant. They want to see it in the by right.
I appreciate that you've extended the offer as someone who knows well, because I believe you were here when Arlington went first
Yeah.
in doing this, and we've since gone through, after a period of being with it for years, some improvements to that ordinance. I think our experiences could be a benefit to the group in figuring out what are the appropriate ways to do this, because it seems like your end goal is what we have, and that is the ability for these things to happen without
A lot of barriers.
the
and-
review of the public body and all of the associated costs and delays with that.
And you are probably going to be fine with this, but.
But we'd like to work with you to make sure
But I'd like you,
that.
yeah, and I'd like you to look at it,
Okay.
sure.
There's a principle of
Right.
local control and land control that's kind of our.
Well, that's a different level. This is.
It is.
That's
And
a
there are lots of
different-
road
All right,
groups
I
that
think
Want to do stuff.
Delegate-elect
Survival is only
McClure
one.
would like to jump in
I will
here.
only say that my presence has kept it more contained than it would ordinarily be contained.
Great,
So that's all I
great.
can say. But yes, we would welcome your
Thank you. Ms. McClure.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. So there are a number of different things that I'm working on related to housing affordability and eviction prevention. One would be a budget amendment to increase the emergency rental assistance that already exists, and we need to inject more money into that. Another piece of legislation that I'm working on now is in response to what happened in Crystal Plaza when the 60-plus notices were sent out to residents enacting that right in the fire or casualty damage section of the code. So I'm amending that section of the code to extend the time that residents have, and then also put in some safeguards and measures that require landlords to meet with tenants beforehand. So I'm working with the landlord of Crystal Plaza, in addition to some other stakeholders, to get that language kind of fine-tuned before we get to session. And in addition to that, there's a number of different renters' rights and protections that we're looking at. I know Delegate Alfonso Lopez will speak to the right to counsel and some other things that we're looking at. And in terms of what would be, I guess, of interest to you all on the local level, is there's a bill that I'm working with Senator Favola on that will allow local authority to allow committed affordable units in senior living centers.
which you already really have the authority to do. We're just
Clarifying that.
So,
All right, Delegate Lopez.
just along those same lines, warranty of habitability, condemnation services, or we need to make sure that that's clarified. Right now, the Virginia Code has been so weighed down by one side versus the other side that it's been problematic. And also, something that the Biden administration has been working on a great deal is our junk fees, and specifically junk fees as it relates to rental housing. So I've heard from numerous residents of Arlington and South Arlington along the Columbia Pike corridor where they're being charged for, above more than $50 a month so that they can pay for their own rent. And so through the system that's already free to get, access to something that they should already be allowed to get access to. They have to, all these insane junk fees that I can elaborate on. But that's something I really would like to sort of tackle this year because there's great model legislation from around the country as well as out of the White House. The big thing, however, that I'll be working on with David Bulova is increasing the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the amount of money we actually have in the budget from around $75 million each year, or actually was lowered to around $40 million each year in the biennial budget, to, I want it to be $200 million per year, the biennial budget. I think will be more around 100 million to 150 million is what David, who's on the appropriations committee, is going to be fighting for. But the fact that we have so sort of woefully underfunded affordable housing and the trust fund relative to other similarly sized states. And the thing I keep coming back to is that, you know, for every project that we actually fund in Northern Virginia, there are 7 projects that don't get funded. For every project that we fund in Southside, Southwest Virginia, there are 3 projects that don't get funded. And the fact is that in 2023, you have people, you have children living in double wide trailers in Southside, Southwest Virginia that have leaky roofs and mold on the walls. And that's not affordable housing. That shouldn't be something that we're okay with in 2023. And so the fact that we aren't funding the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which I'm very proud to have been the patron of in 2013, is, well, it's not what we should be doing in Virginia in this day and age. So I hope, and I appreciate the county's support in the past. I appreciate the county's active support, you know, in the General Assembly when we've gotten it from $6 million a year to where we have it today, but we still need to do more.
Absolutely. And so, you know, we always appreciate that we are not necessarily going to be the recipients of any increases on a pro rata basis, but the very circumstances that you identified are reasons why it needs to be a priority for us. Senator Evan.
Yeah, can you hear me better now, Mr. Chairman?
Absolutely.
Good. Okay. On the topic of housing, first off, on the junk fees that Delegate Lopez mentioned, I've been working with a statewide coalition for a number of months now on a bill to forbid the use of these junk fees. In other words, that they wouldn't be able to charge a tenant for repairing a unit that they're renting and not owning. That sort of thing's a junk fee. And so we have a bill that we're introducing on that. Then on affordable housing and eviction protection, I'm working with Delegate Bennett Parker of Alexandria on a bill that she had last year. I'm introducing a Senate version that if a tenant were to owe a relatively small amount, say a few $100s on rent that costs a few $1,000s, that rather than be evicted over a few $100s, that they could have a payment plan for that smaller amount to enable them to stay in their home and make good on the payment.
Interesting. Thank you. So our next section is on finance, and I can be very brief because the overriding principle here, first of all, it's based on an assumption that the General Assembly is not going to be expanding or delegating taxing authority to the localities to come up with revenue streams that it deems appropriate. So with that as an assumption, you can tell me if that's a safe one. The principle here is do no harm. For every
Good principle.
act to sort of either score political points or even to pursue what someone believes is appropriate tax policy, recognizing that that can have an impact on local revenue sources, which has cascading consequences. One such example of that is the desire to further exempt groceries and hygiene products from local option sales tax, which, while on its face, it's a regressive tax. I would love for it not to be there, but if it goes away, that means nearly $300 million from local governments in the Commonwealth of Virginia without any replacement. And that is an incredibly high burden to place on localities to fix. So the very notion of trying to do something to support anti-regressive tax policy could in fact have a very regressive impact on localities' ability to care for its residents. So that level of thoughtfulness we would like to see with any approaches to tax policy. And then our third one here is an easy one because it doesn't really cost a dime, but it could in fact help localities avoid spending tons of money for not anything that's value added. So Senator Warner was principal author and patron of the Federal Data Transparency Act, which does require reporting from local governments, and that's a fine thing. But since we also have reporting requirements in the same general space to the Commonwealth. We would love for there to be an alignment of those federal and state requirements so that we are not spending what will amount to millions upon millions of dollars on compliance with financial reporting, really capturing similar information and with similar intent. So if the state could work to do that, doesn't cost the state anything, and it could in fact save localities a lot.
And I think we can probably do this in a regulatory way. I don't think we need a statute. Okay.
Terrific.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reasonable ask. Yeah, it's a reasonable ask.
Thank you, thank you. All right, Mr. Karantonis, you didn't have anything on this, right?
We're going to transportation, huh?
Yeah, we're going to move next to transportation, seeing no other hands, and that's going to be Mr. DeFerranti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be chair of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission this year. I'm trying to remember, I don't know if you have been chair in the past, Senator Favola, when you were on the board, but you were chair of so many different areas that that's one that I'll be taking on. And it is a critical role to take on. The first of our priorities is on Metro funding. It's been covered pretty extensively in the news. I've been working with Kate Mattice, who Senator Eben and I currently serve on the commission together, trying to make sure that we're making all of the best arguments for sustained funding. The number of stations per person in Arlington is as high as I believe any jurisdiction in the region. The backbone, the center of our economic growth is through transportation-oriented development. Metro has to work and has to be funded. There's both the long-term fiscal problem on the operating side, and then the next 2 years, which is candidly one of the reasons why I think it is and was so critical, the outcome of the elections in both chambers for negotiating purposes. But that's one that we identified, I think, even as we recognize the next 2 years is an area we need to focus on. We have to keep that long-term piece in the conversation. And so really appreciate your leadership on that, in particular because we know that we will have to make the case across the state for funding in order to make progress there. That's the first. The second, NVTA funding. I think you each know the history of NVTA funding being used for some local projects, and the balance there being a little being challenged over the last 5 to 8 years. This issue has come up in the last week. There is a desire to point to funding that has really already been dedicated to local projects under the law, and so that's an issue that we'll want to continue to work on. That's the second of the issues. On towing, we're going to work on granting authority to localities to provide better consumer protections for those who have their cars towed. The fourth of our priorities is making good on the piece of the Commonwealth's commitment to $195 million in non-general fund investments for new projects as part of the Amazon HQ2 development. That I think is critical. Vision Zero is a priority that I think you may have seen covered in the media, but it is something that we have spent a lot of time on. We have a Vision Zero coordinator trying to get to zero pedestrian deaths, and supporting our efforts to reach that goal often requires changes to state code to allow us some flexibility and funding. The last is a study with respect to autonomous vehicles. Those following this closely know that this technology has a potential to change things, change a lot of transportation, but we need to make sure that it's safe and the legal framework that applies. So happy to answer questions if you have them. I certainly feel that Metro funding will be a critical priority over the entire course of the session. We are trying to take an approach that acknowledges that it is a shared responsibility, and that certainly we need to and will contribute as is appropriate, but also the state. I think the comments with respect to Billy Kiger and the state's surplus is not there until we have been able to pay all the bills that are necessities, and Metro is a necessity we look forward to working with you and those across the state on that one. So,
Senator Evan.
Yeah, regarding Metro, a group of appropriators from both the House and the Senate met with Secretary Shep Miller last week during the Senate, or actually the week before Thanksgiving, during the Senate finance retreat. And I'm not expecting the administration to include additional funding for Metro in their budget that the governor will present on December 20th. But I'm hoping that with the support of our colleagues from other regions, and at least in the Democratic caucus, that we'll be able to send something to his desk to help in the short term. But Maryland and DC need to step up also, because I know Virginia, of course, won't pay for 1/3 of the issue without the other jurisdictions cooperating. But we're working on it, and I know it's a big funding issue. The administration was not too encouraging. They see Metro service as having increased to all-time high, a large percentage of buses being idle during peak periods. At the same time, the ridership has gone down even before the pandemic. So that's what we're dealing with. They're looking for some Metro reform, although they may well realize that we'll have to cut a check in the end.
thank you, Senator Eben, and I know the chair and others will have, but I do understand that was a important conversation, and the details on the delegation of funding for other purposes is critical, and I am mindful that we have work to do there, but certainly eager to engage with you on that and trying to get to the more manageable numbers, and also that's part of why your conversation is part of why I indicated that we have to own some responsibility. It's just that NVTC, as you know, we have the study that shows we're generating far more economic revenue. You guys know this, but we're generating economic revenue that is outsized to our share of the population, and NVTC has made that case. We're going to have a lot of work over a long period of time to do on this, and so the details, just appreciate your leadership on it.
Thank you, Mr.
Well, you're absolutely right, and we shared a lot of that with Secretary Miller, and we'll continue to press the case with the administration if they continue to need our support on other matters.
Thank you, Senator Eben. Senator Favola.
I would just say, it would be helpful if members of the board, the Virginia Transportation Commission Board, came up with suggestions they would like us to explore for this dedicated source of revenue. Is, a regional sales tax in the DMV area out of the question? Could it be in play, but understanding that DC and Maryland would have to agree? I guess Maryland sort of takes care of its obligation to Metro without involving the localities, and Virginia has a different model.
Yeah, they've got a statewide system, and so there is a slide deck that is some thinking that NVTC is, on the policy side, have put together. Want to take that, and there's going to be a process for integrating that with what's politically practicable and what can work in this environment. So there's a ton of work left to do, and I'm sure that I know each of my colleagues will have additional thoughts, but
it would take us some lead time to get anything major through. That's all I will say.
Yeah,
I did have
that's
one
the
thought.
important thing this year, just to highlight. There are two Metro asks, if you will. There is the long-term solution, of which things like a regional sales tax, which have vexed the region for a long time, really shouldn't, because a lot of the things that people have voiced as concerns are really matters of policy and can be dealt with as such. But then there's also the immediate short-term needs of Metro, which are not necessarily about dedicated sources, but how to allocate revenue. And we appreciate Senator Eben's caution about what we're likely to see with the budget. But one of the things we like to ask is as you see opportunities to not necessarily address Metro specifically, but as the General Assembly sees fit to support other regional transportation initiatives that are important in the Commonwealth, to not let Metro get decoupled from those conversations.
Right, yeah. gaining friends across the geographic bridges, I think is important.
Yep.
We'll try our
Good
best.
point.
There are transportation needs across the Commonwealth,
Absolutely.
so.
Okay, I think we're going to move next to Mr. Karantonis to discuss our economic
There's
development.
a perfect segue, by the way, because we're talking about the economy, and this is an economy that works for all Virginia. I fully understand, and I think that when we are talking to our colleagues across the Commonwealth, we actually, after a while, can bring across the argument that this is an essential part of infrastructure, just like Hampton Roads has essential parts of infrastructure. We paid altogether for a Port Authority budget there, and so that's not it's not unprecedented that we support essential infrastructure in the Commonwealth. And this particular one supports, literally more than 3 million jobs in this region, out of which a significant part, in more than half, in the Virginia side. So, and this is what brings me to economic development, which you are pretty familiar with the economic outlook that we are facing right now, because a significant part of our tax revenue comes from the commercial sector, which right now has a more than 23% in average vacancy rate, and this has been persistent from the pandemic onwards. And in addition to that, we don't really know how things will go. We are not able to plan very well based on the signs that we're getting from the commercial real estate market. So state funding for economic initiatives, to the degree that it's available and it's backed by the Commonwealth, is absolutely critical and important. Specifically office market repositioning, so they're enhancing our ability to, for example, consolidate buildings that one has like 30% and the other has 40% occupancy, and being able to incentivize the consolidation of two tenants in one building. The amazing effect of that is that a building that is reasonably occupied performs way better than its sum of parts, as a sum than its parts. So, and it frees up real estate for adaptive reuse and for other uses, and makes the land use policy here a better thing. And last but not least, Arlington is a place that is among the leading jurisdictions for tourism in Virginia. We have seen that when the Commonwealth has invested, we have performed very, very well. Right now, this sector is occupying a lot of Arlingtonians, and we have seen that how problematic it is when during the pandemic this sector was almost hit very hard and almost dead. So maintaining that is extremely important to maintain a balanced workforce here in Northern Virginia.
Senator Favola.
Thank you. I'm looking at putting in a grant proposal, it would be a budget amendment, that would allow localities to use some state dollars to help transition unused office space into some community use that you might think is important, be it a childcare center or housing flats, if you are looking to look for some type of an affordable housing option. But I have to get that grant program funded.
We are in a process right now to expedite, to fast track flexibility and removal of obstacles that are not any more reasonable in the current situation. So any additional help to that would be extremely welcome and put in use immediately. So this would produce
We
immediately.
can work on some budget language that can address what Ms. Karatonis has just mentioned.
This goes under the Commercial Resilience Initiative, and I think this board and our elected colleagues agree with that. We will continue that, and this will be the first half of the next calendar year will be extremely prolific in removing obstacles and being able to do things.
Well, whatever flexibility you want built into this grant program that I'm thinking about, I'm happy to do that. So just work with Ilana find some
Absolutely.
language, and I've been working with your Director of Economic Development, so he's been helpful,
And,
so.
and again, investment in workforce development and the collateral assets, Metro, VRE, without these, we cannot actually support economic development here.
All right, I'm going to move us ahead since we do still have several pages to go in our legislative package, and I'd like to provide ample opportunity for our delegation to share with us their priorities as well. So, Mr. Lento, I believe you have the next two sections.
Yeah, so I'll try to move through them quickly. The first one is criminal justice reform. We have a few priorities listed under this. The first one is immigration. We oppose any state mandate to localities requiring local law enforcement to evaluate the immigration status of individuals encountered during lawful stops or other routine police activities. I don't think I need to elaborate a lot on that, but I think it's really important to have our police focus on keeping our streets safe, and there's no need for them to invest any time in discovering or engaging on immigration status. There is no benefit, and that is the job of another federal department. I don't believe that our police should be involved in that. So that's, we oppose that. The other thing we're asking for is, to help fund reimbursable positions related to body-worn cameras across all departments. We need additional staff in the Commonwealth Attorney's, Police Department, Fire Department, Sheriff's Office, and Public Defender's Office to effectively implement these programs. While the body-worn cameras have been a great addition for our police and for our community to ensure accountability and safe policing, we just don't have the staff to evaluate all the footage that we're seeing and to use it effectively to protect our community and to protect our police in the processes that are happening in the community. So if you all can consider that one. Funding for prosecutor offices, our own Commonwealth Attorney's Office is asking for additional staff, again, for things like the body-worn cameras, but also for other needs that they have, so that just ensuring there's adequate funding for prosecution to address misdemeanors, creation of diversion services in particular. There's a big push to do that in the country, but we're showing that there's data showing that it's working. So anything we can do to support that. Sexual and gender-based violence, supporting measures to combat sexual and gender-based violence and crimes, including human trafficking, intimate partner violence, sexual assault, and stalking. We know these are issues in our community and in the region. And so anything you can do to highlight that and support efforts to reduce that and to address measures in particular for human trafficking, amongst the other things listed. And then regarding marijuana, just ensuring that legislation on marijuana remains consistent with our policies as far as, taxing, revenue, land use, public health, safety, whatever you do there, it's really just aligning it with how our local policies are in effect for any other commerce and business, and just being mindful of that. And do you want me to go on to education and youth, Christian? Do you want me to pause here?
I see Senator Evans' hand up, so why don't we pause for a moment before you continue. Senator Evans.
Just briefly, I passed marijuana regulation through the Senate last year. It failed in the House. I'm hopeful this year that we'll be able to pass something and get it to the governor. And I wanted to point out that Delegate Krizak and I are providing for, rather than the 3% local tax on cannabis sales that was in last year's bill, at least for now, we have it planned at 6%. For the local tax, and we've lowered the state tax a bit to provide for some local revenue from that if it should come to be.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
I just, in this general.
Ebola. And just by the way, I do this not for formality, but it's an accessibility tool for people who cannot see who is speaking to hear who has been recognized. So that's why.
Clarity in running the meeting is always a good thing. The child advocacy centers, I think you're familiar with them. I am putting their mission now in statute, and under the human trafficking section of the code, when the state police suspect a child has been a victim of human trafficking, there will be a forensic interview done by experienced people at the child advocacy center. So information that would be critical to a criminal investigation or maybe even a prosecution can be attained. Right now, we're running into trouble. Well, I mean, the state police are not as well trained at interviewing youth, a child, as, you might expect, and yet they still need some critical information, and they're looking for alternative. We want to do what's best for the child and for law enforcement. So,
All right.
And not just,
Mr. Lento.
just real quick, thank you to Chair Dorsey. Just real quick, I want to highlight what you said, Senator Favola. It is a lot of youth that are human trafficked. They are targeted and most vulnerable. So thank you for noting that, and just, again, continuing to recognize that a lot of our human traffic victims are started when they're youth, when they're underage. They're targeted because of their situations and anticipated or seeing vulnerabilities regarding their economic and environmental circumstances. So thank you for noting that, and just again maintaining an eye on how we can address those issues.
Absolutely, and we're going to ensure there's a safe harbor, so the child would not in any way be charged. And it's a complicated issue as I'm delving into it. This is year 2 of me trying to figure out what we can do to actually fill the gap and come up with something that works for all of the parties, especially
Thank you,
our
Senator
children.
Favola. Okay, Ms. Talento, please continue.
So going on education and youth, teacher raises, we obviously support our teacher pay increases. Arlington always makes significant efforts to annually raise teacher salaries that is consistent with local revenue. And so when we have state mandated teacher raises with Arlington County's schools having such a high composite index ratio, we just do not get a lot of state funding to support that. And so it really comes out of tax dollars. And so really, doing that local match, just being thoughtful about how the impact Arlington in particular, considering that we don't get a lot of the funding that comes from the state, and that it impacts, like right now it's a tight budget year. They're having to prioritize the state mandated teacher increases. So just being thoughtful about how that impacts Arlington schools in particular. We're already have salaries and increases in many of our positions beside above the SOQ positions that the state funds and has minimums for. So again, just considering how some of these really great legislative moves in particular may not always have the best impact on schools and costing us to actually consider cuts that we may not have to consider otherwise. The next one is vaping. There's been a lot of advocacy in our community for the last couple of years. We have multiple vape shops near schools and child care centers. I'm sure there are a few, but I know in particular here in our middle schools and high schools have multiple vape shops in any direction that are within walking distance. I understand that there's also been other legislators in other parts of Northern Virginia looking at addressing this concern. We do know that there are vaping products being sold to underage youth. We have heard that anecdotally. There have been community members who have reported that to the police. So recognizing that these are not places that need to be around our schools, kids are again being targeted. And so whatever you can do to increase the penalties for sale of vaping products, prioritize this type of investigation and prosecution, and anything you can do to help prevent the operation of vape shops in your schools would be greatly appreciated. And then all this goes to youth mental health. We've talked about mental health. I know that the governor has moved funding towards mental health, and we're grateful for that. We're really making sure that we're not forgetting about our basics, like the professional staff and services that counties already support, like our nurses in our schools. That's a county-funded position. A lot of our DHS staff, these are all things that our county already funds. And so as we're moving towards supporting youth mental health, recognizing that we also need to support the things that are our basics as we expand and strengthen support for our youth as we're addressing their mental health crisis that our youth is experiencing now.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I see Senator Evans' hand.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. On the topic of vaping, I just wanted to make you all aware that Delegate Hope and I are continuing our work to require the licensing of vape sellers, and it would also require our bill to tobacco sellers would have to be licensed. And the purpose for that is the fine for selling vapes to an underage child is not significant, and you could even figure it into your cost of doing business if your business model is to sell to children. But if you were to lose your license because you sold to underage youth, that'd be a more significant penalty. So we have legislation being prepared to license all tobacco sellers and vapes particularly.
Thank you.
Senator Favola.
I also have legislation, I would say it's a companion bill to what Senator Eben just discussed. And this you might like, because it would give local
Not that we wouldn't like to.
not that you're not in love with all of my land use bills. I did come from local government, but so this bill would give localities the authority to prohibit the retail of retail vape shops near schools. So I don't know what I'm going to get back. I don't know if it's going to be 100 yards or 300 yards, but I certainly will share the draft with you before I submit it to the clerk, and we can get it in good shape.
So, yeah, we'd been Senator Favola and I have been working with the school system and some other folks on that issue. And also, I do like the idea of adding childcare centers to it as well. So
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, mine's in there,
Take a crack at guns while you're at it.
yeah. Okay, well, with schools and childcare centers, yeah. Yep.
All right,
See what we
so
get back.
Delegate-elect McClure.
So just to add on to what my colleagues have said, in addition to what you all presented, I think funding those youth support or professional support folks are extremely important, definitely a top priority, especially when it comes to mental health, when it comes to substance use disorder, and just wanted to, extend my support in terms of what Senator Eben and Delegate Patrick Hope are working on. And then in addition to supporting youth mental health and just stability in general, I'm working with some folks to address youth homelessness and looking at different sections of the code to see where we can increase access to shelter and other services.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll now move to the next section, general government, and oops, that's my own number. So I'll be very brief with this, consistent with the theme, unfunded mandates. We don't like them. Even sometimes there's a well-intentioned, good government motive behind some mandates that are passed down to localities, but they do have administrative burdens and costs, which are often unacknowledged or unaccounted for. And certainly it flies in the face of our desire to make sure that we are being proper stewards of the resources that we do get from our tax-paying public to only pursue activities that have useful utility. We talked about electronic meetings for public bodies, so I will not go into that at length, except to say that Arlington provides a great case study for what happens when you can have liberalized opportunities for this. And it's not just from the standpoint of participants, though we are grateful to be able to have half of our delegation, as well as a member of the board, participating virtually tonight. There is a benefit to members of the public that I think goes unappreciated, because part of the notion is that we want to provide, or at least what I've heard often, is that they want to make sure that the public is not closed off from being able to engage with their public bodies. Well, we found that particularly with some of our big issues, half or more of our public chooses to participate virtually. This is really something that has expanded access to government. And so if we can figure out how to liberalize this and not make it burdensome, it would really be to, I think, the benefit of what the opponents of liberalized virtual participation intend. Moving on, broadband access. We just want to hope to see barriers lowered for localities to be able to offer or provide affordable and high-quality service, or to foster competition from the private sector that does the same. particularly as it relates to digital equity for underserved population. And we believe that by allowing this to be more within what local governments are able to pursue, that it can enhance cybersecurity and resilience in the face of catastrophic IT issues. Procurement, back to the whole local control thing. It's really localities that best know how to ensure that bidding is constructed in a way that provides maximum value for taxpayers. We certainly acknowledge that there is a state role in making sure that there are predictable rules that transcend jurisdictions, but to preserve and protect as much local authority in those matters as possible is a priority for us. And then as it relates to information technology security, the state does have a role in helping local jurisdictions develop the appropriate tools to keep themselves secure in the wake of any cyber attacks on their cloud systems. And we believe bringing the jurisdictions under some standardized baseline that the state can help create will allow our jurisdictions to be more resilient and also could potentially lower costs by having all of these jurisdictions up to a modern standard. So I see no questions or comments on any of that, so we'll move next to public safety and Vice Chair Garvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just going to talk briefly on a few things on public safety and emergencies. Staffing, no surprise, please maintain adequate funding for police departments, sheriffs, jail personnel. And my note here says $599 money, which probably means more to you than it does to me. But I'm pretty sure that that's where some money comes from and want to maintain that, please. Jail diversion efforts, Senator Favola, you actually talked about this a little bit. I mean, so much the mental health and jail just goes together, unfortunately, and so we need to make that work as well as we can for people, particularly those with substance abuse issues. So adequately funding those efforts would be really helpful. And that's where a lot of our looking forward to our difficult budget coming up. There are few areas where we're thinking we're going to need to increase, because I think we're coming up with some very tough budget years, and certainly mental health issues are one of those areas that I think we're all going to have to increase, and help from the state would be greatly appreciated and do well by everybody. Next Generation 911, please support statewide transition and make sure that there's some state funds that will be dedicated to this, and please don't make it an unfunded mandate that we have to switch to Next Generation 911 and we have to pay for it. We please make sure that the state helps supports that and supports the transition. And lastly, swatting, which we got a fair distance with last time, but this, those are not fully, there's no full restitution right now for people who have hoax communications, and sometimes that can be huge cost, and it would be good to have that full restitution of whatever damage is caused by the folks doing this. And I think as more and more localities experience this, there probably will be more and more support for it, we hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Garvey. Okay, we'll now move to the last section. Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you. Last but not least, energy, environment, and climate change, or climate emergency, as it's obvious that we have to refer to. So, because the changes there, the emergency needs to be realized. So first, it's an 8-point, yes, indeed, it's an 8-point catalog. First, won't surprise you, we want Reggie to be again active, and we hope that something will change the mind of the governor, but we hope that the General Assembly and our delegation will be advocating for that. It's not only the obvious cap and invest program benefits for the environment. There are also other collateral beneficiaries of that. So, for example, affordable housing could benefit a lot from these investments. We could actually support the rehab of existing affordable housing or improvement of new affordable housing, and create assets that are more affordable for longer time for more Arlingtonians of lower and medium income. For example, Barcroft Apartments, General Rehab could have benefited from REGI funds. The Virginia Clean Economy Act, a huge accomplishment of immediate past legislatures. We want this to be protected. We think that this was a huge step forward, a leap forward, actually. So we don't want to see this undermined at any rate. Number 3 is a very interesting and very encompassing, many issues, encompassing points, is about public-private partnerships and the ability to support energy efficiency incentives and also the tools that help to use these incentives, like, for example, green banks, like stretching, allowing us to be able to stretch building codes, building energy codes, like supporting us in and allowing us to properly deploy electric vehicle and solar infrastructure, implement commercial building efficiency benchmarking and zero emission transportation options. For all the above, at some point, we need jurisdiction to be able to implement programs, to develop and implement programs that really have teeth and deliver and create the basic incentive for customers to perform better and then have enjoy the benefits of a program. Energy choice, under 4, renewable energy choice. This is also sometimes referred to as community choice aggregation, but we mean that not only for jurisdictions, but also for customers, for groups of customers, etc. The ability to be able to bundle, to combine their purchasing power and be able to buy renewable electricity from any licensed competitive supplier of electric energy. We always understand that this is a high, that's an issue that's very hotly debated in Virginia, but we would like to see progress being made on this. Ratepayer protections, that this is about allowing local government to be able to advocate for ratepayers' interests in the State Corporation Commission. Believe it or not, the issue of households that are here overcharged, that are sometimes burdened by the bills they receive, is actually far bigger than one would expect in a jurisdiction with a relatively high income. And we experience that very, very often when we talk with constituents, especially where I live along Columbia Pike. This happens quite often. Tree canopy, this is a repeating request to give us authority to be able to regulate that locally. I believe that we are capable of doing that, and there's no detriment to other jurisdictions to allow us to be able to manage our urban forest the way we can do. As a matter of fact, a lot of planning that we've done, we have goals incorporated there. Our community has agreed to these goals. For example, the most recently adopted Langston Boulevard plan has a aspirational goal of a 39% tree canopy coverage. We need the ability to be able to regulate that so that we can get more reliably to this tree canopy coverage. Stormwater and local assistance funds, SLAF, increase the SLAF funding to support the projects that provide the Chesapeake Bay total maximum daily loads, the nutrient sediment reductions. This is becoming tougher as we have improved. So every time the next step, the next scale of being compliant proves to be more expensive, tougher to accomplish, and the states, the Commonwealth's help on this would be very, very welcome. And last, also but not least, the PFAS chemicals, or the forever chemicals called the parent polyfluoroalkyl substances, that is about producer responsibility and making sure that parties that are affected by these forever chemicals, which are almost ubiquitous at this point, that we are not going to be burdened with the entirety of the cost of removing them, both from adding to the existing levels of contamination with these chemicals, as well as fighting with the consequences of these chemicals, which we still don't know in their full width.
Senator Favola.
Question. What kind of authority do you want regarding the tree canopy?
Yeah, still under discussion.
They're sort of on private, trees, a lot of your trees are on private property, so what,
So I will say that, and he's not here, he regrets that he can't be here, but Delegate Hope did let me know that he is in conversation on coming up with some ideas on what some appropriate authority would look like. And so we're going to wait for him to
Okay.
do some of that work, and hopefully we'll provide some positive comment.
In short, this is the authority. So a tree today is a piece of private property that the owner can dispose as they please, when they please, under whatever circumstances, et cetera. And sometimes they are even misguided by their, by not very well-organized interests. For example, insurance interests that convince people to cut their trees because they're somehow detrimental. So we would like to have a system where. And a possibility would be to have a system where it wouldn't be that direct, where a level of permit would be required to remove a tree, and that would fundamentally change the way. So that's the kind of discussion that has been had. This hasn't been successful until now. And at least 2 or 3 legislatures, probably. We recognize it's a very difficult change in the legislative
So
system.
the stuff that this Delegate Hope has worked on in the past is address some of the VDOT issues we've had, where VDOT will come in and say, well, we need to build a path here, we need to build a bike path or a road, and then.
which is right away that they own.
Yeah, which right away they own, but they're also, in some cases, 100-year-old, 150-year-old, 200-year-old trees. So we're trying to work with them on some of this, but I'd be very interested to talk to Patrick about the next steps. One of the things that I'm very interested in terms of the SLAF funding is that as we address the WIP 3 goals that we're trying to attain for Chesapeake Bay remediation, it's incredibly important that we not only address the Ag BMP issue and the agriculture best management practices, but also the SLAF funding. And I think the plan is, at least from Barbara and I were at the Virginia Environment and Renewable Energy Caucus meeting today for 5 hours, going and getting into the weeds a little bit about how SLAF funding needs to desperately be increased to address not only the sort of rising cost issues that you're talking about, but also enabling the state to meet its WIP 3 goals with the EPA, and also address the long-term health and benefits of the Chesapeake Bay. So highly, really appreciate your support for that. Along the same lines, you'll find that a significant number of pieces of legislation have been submitted. I actually gave 54 bills to the House caucus to give to freshman members, which the House Democratic Caucus has a number, in terms of addressing everything from power purchase agreements to stretch codes to, small tweaks on legislation that can actually do a lot of good, that were simple fixes on the Virginia Code that have kept us from being as environmentally sensitive or protective as we can be. And so, and on top of that, there's a number of bills that I'll be working on as well in this area. But I think we're going to have hopefully a good year in terms of addressing environmental protection. And it deals with a lot of the things that you've been talking about.
We did use a lot of one-time money for the Stormwater Local Assistance Fund. I guess you realized in 2022, we put, I don't know.
Yes.
Millions of dollars in, which helped significantly.
And it has multipliers, because at the same time we have here with starting with the land disturbance ordinance, we have tightened a lot the conditions under which somebody who builds a new house. And this has, we're controlling phosphorus contribution down to the 4th decimal point. So, so that has spurred private investment in that already.
Yeah.
So that's essential. This is not only the money that comes from Commonwealth, but the money that enables us to activate
leverage it.
through private investment in that.
So,
Oh, I was just saying, back to the SLAF funding, I think at one point there was $100 million in the budget and it got reduced down to like 25 or 30 million. So we just really would love to see it
yeah.
back
come
up
up
at the
for this.
100 million.
And you know what's been fascinating is over the last 2 years, you've seen
Get it back.
a significant number of pieces of legislation that wanted to sort of kill the Virginia Clean Economy Act by paper cuts. And, you know, and thank God the state Senate, Barbara and Adam, Senator Eben and Senator Favola were able to sort of stand fast because the governor was perfectly willing to sign a bunch of these bills that would have slowly eroded what we'd accomplished with that bill. Along those same lines, you know, with electrical vehicle charging stations, and like the first bill put in the House by the Republican caucus is a bill to simply get rid of all of the electrical vehicle standards that we put in place a couple years ago.
All those bills came to my committee
Right.
last year.
And so, you know, this is an interesting time where we have to address a lot of these things and actually be pretty vigilant about, and also considering the fact that you only have a 2-seat majority in the Senate and a 2-seat majority in the House. Getting, you know, we might have to, you know, we're going to fight hard for a lot of things that we hold true as values, but it's going to be sometimes a half a loaf.
So with that, I think we should really transition to having you all lead with your priorities for the remainder of the time of our discussion, since you have been very generous with our very Arlington wonky legislative. We have, but we do need to
Has
give
been
them their time.
conversational.
And so I would say that with your indulgence, and so much of what you all do is based on seniority, let's shake it up here and go on reverse seniority and give the first word to Delegate-elect McClure to outline your priorities, please.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate y'all going through and letting us know what your priorities are. That's really, really helpful, especially in the planning process. And as you know, our drafting deadline is this Thursday. So as a freshman, I am thankfully a little more ready than I should be. So I'm very excited to share with you my priorities. A lot of them I already mentioned. A few things that I'm thinking about, of course, we'll have to kind of whittle it down, carrying things as a freshman, but in thinking about some legislation that addresses housing affordability, as mentioned, definitely eviction prevention. A lot of that will be budget amendments, renters' rights and protections, and making sure that we address that power imbalance between tenants and landlords, gun violence prevention and safety measures. There's a couple of things that I'm looking at there. Criminal justice reform, mental health and substance use support investments, and also looking at some legislation increasing EV-ready capability in new builds. So I'm working with some stakeholders on that and in addressing the last topic that you just mentioned. Workers' rights and protections, there's a couple of things that I'm looking at on that. And then expanding childcare access through subsidy investments and some other programs. And then some other top priorities include, you know, we're all collectively going to put forward a constitutional amendment or a couple of constitutional amendments enshrining reproductive health care into our Constitution, marriage equality, and voting rights into the Virginia Constitution, and working to prioritize fully funding our schools, raising teacher pay, and not diverting those public resources away from public schools to private schools. So there's a lot there, you know, workforce development and resiliency, as you all mentioned, that, you know, we prioritize, I know myself specifically. And, you know, and as far as the specifics, we already went through that in conversation, but that's at the high level, encompasses the bills that I'm looking at carrying. So looking forward to working with you all and you know, any ideas that you may have for myself or the delegation, please feel free to send it our way.
Thank you very much. And don't you only have 8 bills?
Well, it is suggested that freshmen should carry around that, maybe a little less. So I am working my way down, which is a good thing, instead of working my way up.
Very good, very good. All right, I think I counted more than 8 priorities for sure. So, all right, good luck with that. All right, why don't we move next to, since you all, the remaining members of the delegation here, I believe all started your roles in the same year. So I think really the only fair thing to do here is alphabetical order. So
You
we'll
can go to
start with
Senator
Senator
Evan.
Evan.
Well, since you're doing the virtual people first, so.
You are muted.
Senator Evan, you're muted.
Well, you can't hear me?
Now we can.
And
Okay, good.
Yeah, we
I
can
was
hear
just
you,
saying that
although
I'm the dean of the delegation. I've served for 20 years in Arlington, longer than anyone else. But happy to speak next anyway. I was asked to
Unless you
give
count
you
my-
some background on our fiscal outlook, which I'll try and do briefly, and then just mention a few more priorities. Virginia's revenue's been ahead of our official forecast year to date, $917 million ahead by the end of October. In these past few years, we've enjoyed growing revenues and surpluses, and large year-end surpluses allowed for additional one-time spending, while revenue growth supported new ongoing spending and some modest permanent tax cuts. The Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee staff estimates additional revenues of about $1.4 billion in fiscal year 24 above the official forecast, which was based on a pessimistic outlook in August 2023. But under the staff forecast, the revenue would decline 0.5% in fiscal year 24 compared to fiscal year 23 based on actual collections from tax policy actions. And we're expecting moderate revenue growth of 3% in fiscal year 25 and just 3.8% in fiscal year 26. And we're no longer going to be enjoying the federal funds that came with the COVID relief bills. So the committee staff estimates that mandatory budget pressures like K through 12 and Medicaid are going to outpace our additional revenue for fiscal year 25 by about $843 million and $250 million in fiscal year 26. So this is a long way of saying that we don't have a lot of money for new programs. Beyond mandatory spending, there's significant interest in updating the K through 12 funding formula and additional funding for child protective services and developmental disability waiver slots. So the Senate's going to focus on achieving structural balance, ensuring revenue matches ongoing spending. Current obligations need to be met before new spending or cutting taxes. I don't think you're going to see any new tax cuts this year. But we are in a strong position to weather a recession. Reserves now will total $4.6 billion by fiscal year 24. We understand that Metro has a significant funding issue. The relevant committees, the Transportation Committee and particularly the Finance Committee in the Senate, have not yet evaluated specific solutions, but we are very much aware. And before I mention just a few of my priorities, I want to mention that the session that starts on January 10th is a 60-day or long session because we'll be doing a new 2-year budget. We are waiting for the governor to present his proposed budget on December 20th, and then we'll start tinkering with it. I will chair the Finance and Appropriations Committee's Public Safety Committee, so I'll be heavily involved in money for law enforcement and the 599 money that Ms. Garvey referred to. And before I forget, I want to mention to those in the public that are listening that on December 11th, the delegation will be holding a public hearing in the county board meeting, county boardroom where you're meeting tonight, and that'll be at 7:30 p.m. on December 11th for members of the public. And very briefly, a few of the bills that I tend to bring forward again are renewing my efforts to increase the penalty for threatening, harassing, intimidating, or assaulting elections officials and staff. Right now, it's a penalty to interfere with an elections officer while they're doing their duties on election day. But there's no penalty for threatening, harassing, or intimidating or assaulting them because of their role in the election on some other day, or people who work for the registrar or the registrar herself, that sort of thing. I've got a few firearms bills, prohibit ghost guns, a public carry ban on assault weapons, working still on forbidding the altering or removing of a serial number from a weapon. You referred, I think Delegate McClure referred to the marriage amendment, the Virginia Marriage Discrimination Amendment in our Constitution. It's a stain on the Constitution. I'll be working with Delegate Mark Sickles to not only repeal the bad language of the Marshall-Newman Amendment, but to replace it with an affirmative right to marry for two consenting adults, regardless of their sex, gender, or race. And I've got other bills, but I'm not going to bore you with all of them. I'll be sure that Ms. Crennan is made aware of any that would have an impact on Arlington.
Thank you so much, Senator Evan. We do appreciate that. All right, we'll move next. Senator Favola.
On, right? Thank you. Well, this is going to be a very interesting year. About a third of the Democratic caucus were new senators, but many of them had served in the House. So getting used to the Senate vibe will be something. I will have interesting bills, I think. I'm going to follow my traditional priorities. Foster care, I have a diversion bill, which will ensure that relatives actually get some funding before the child goes into foster care and maybe even prevents the child from going into foster care. I will be requiring, I hope, Child Protective Service agencies to actually set up trust funds for federal dollars that are flowing in the name of the child and should be available to the child when the child exits foster care. Some of them are eligible for if their parents died, SSDI and other kinds of revenue streams. So I will continue to work on those programs and child welfare. I think I mentioned the human trafficking. When it comes to child trafficking, I've got the Child Advocacy Center now playing a role. And then, of course, I'm moving to education. I'm working across the aisle on a program that will, I hope, enhance our IEP process. It's pretty disparate across the Commonwealth, and we're finding large gaps in the way school systems deal with our children with special challenges. So we'll see. The UVA Law Center is drafting a pretty comprehensive bill on that. And of course, I'm doing a lot in the reproductive health area. You know, I'm going back with my menstrual health data bill, which got national attention last year. I expect the governor will once again veto it. I'll give him that opportunity. I'll also give him the opportunity to sign it, but I don't think he'll take that. I do have a bill that will protect providers who provide abortion care to out-of-state patients and to out-of-state patients who come to Virginia for abortion care. So that bill, I think, has dropped. And then I have a slew of consumer protection bills in the area of health care. So some of them would be, for example, the Medical Society of Virginia is really excited about this bill. Once you get a pre-authorization for a drug, these are usually pretty expensive drugs for serious illnesses, that pre-authorization is going to last for the entire time. You don't have to go back and get another pre-authorization under my bill. So the insurance industry is not happy, but they'll get there. We think this is good for patients. This is good for doctors. I've also got a bill that will require prompt payment on the part of insurance companies to patients and hospitals and providers. They're not happy about that either. But we did work together last year on a study, so I'm expecting that all the stakeholders will be happy about the prompt payment. I have another insurance bill which will require insurance companies to create an incentive. I don't tell them what the incentive has to be, but to create an incentive to co-locate primary care and mental health services together. And then I expect there'll be additional bills coming from the Joint Commission on Health Care and the Behavioral Health Commission, both commissions I serve on. Those bills won't count against my slot allocation. So, so I just sort of gave you a little flavor of, again, my professional expertise is in healthcare policies. Might as well use it to the public's good. On the gun safety space, I'm going to try to monitor to make sure that firearms are actually relinquished when an individual is convicted a twice misdemeanor offense of assault and battery of a household member. Right now, the law is that they forfeit their firearm for 3 years. They can either give the firearm to a federally licensed firearms dealer, they can give the firearm to law enforcement, or they can transfer the firearm to an individual who doesn't live with the offender. But there's no monitoring of that transfer, and my bill actually requires that the court be informed and told who's going to get the firearm and that the recipient of the firearm meets certain criteria. So we did not get a hearing in the House last year. I'm expecting that we will, in fact, get a hearing and maybe even passage this year. And, you know, the intersection of gun violence and domestic violence had been a bipartisan effort for many, many years. So I was surprised, really, that the House dismissed it so summarily last year. Elizabeth Bennett Parker had carried the House version. So that's sort of a spattering of where my bills are going to come down. I'll be doing more in behavioral health and probably the workforce issues, probably through budget language. So, but I will certainly keep you posted because I know the workforce is a very important thing. And I just want you to know that Deborah Warren, every time she has the chance, talks to the commissioner of behavioral health and informs him of how the psych bed should work in Arlington at the Virginia Hospital Center and how the how your crises stabilization unit is working in Arlington. So I managed to get Deborah Warren to be a panelist at our Senate Finance Retreat to talk about the whole Senate, to talk to the whole Senate about the crisis stabilization efforts that Arlington is embracing on, just so people know that the state money is being put to good use.
Great. Sounds terrific. And Delegate Lopez.
Oh, sorry, I've got one more bill. I will continue to chair rehab and social services, and under that rubric, the ACLU came to me and asked that I put in a bill requiring the Department of Corrections to create a certificate of rehabilitation, so when an offender leaves jail, that person has this certificate and indemnity goes along with it. So an employer or a landlord would not be sued if they either employ the person or allow the person to rent should there be a crime committed. In this case, it would be a nonviolent crime. So that it's sort of a earth-shattering kind of thing. A couple states have done it. They've done it successfully, but it is under that whole criminal justice thing, and it's a big step forward, and it should come before my committee, as all the child welfare stuff comes before my committee as well.
Okay. That was not Delegate Lopez. That was still Senator Favola.
I'm so sorry.
Delegate Lopez. All right.
Delegate Lopez is doing a great job.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So first off, before I sort of wrap up with my bills, I just want to thank the county manager and all the members of the county board because your staff is amazing. Arlington County staff is always incredibly responsive and very generous and kind with their time and efforts to educate about the needs of the community. So it's greatly appreciated. I think, going to be chairing a committee. I don't know which yet. I am the number 2 in seniority on the Commerce and Energy Committee, which might become the Commerce and Labor Committee or the Labor and Commerce Committee. I don't know yet. Also, I'm number 2 in seniority on Ag, Chesapeake Bay, and Natural Resources. And I really do enjoy my work on both of those committees and what we're able to do for the community up here. So along those lines, a lot of my work in the past has been in the labor space. It's been in environment, renewable energy, a lot of immigration issues, and also some public safety issues. I joke that I have a list of 127 bill ideas on an Excel spreadsheet. This year it's 191. I've actually... It's not a joke. It's not a joke, actually. I've actually given the caucus leadership around 54 bills to give to freshman in the area of environment, renewable energy. And then I also have pre-filed around 51 bills, of which I'll probably do around 25 or so, 25. Some of the issues are basically taking the litter tax, which had not been increased a few years ago for around 40 years, to actually make it follow inflation. Also, last year I was able to get the 96 public handgun and gun safety or gun-related bills. Only one passed and was signed by the governor. Was my bill on tax incentives for purchasing gun safety locks and devices. The last year, trigger locks were taken out of that process and out of that legislative language. I want to add that back in this year. Senator Favola and I had been working over the summer with your staff on addressing the consumer protection advocacy aspects of towing in Virginia. As we all know, that's the one thing that brings Republicans and Democrats together. Also, something that Arlington does very well, but the rest of the Commonwealth needs to do as well, is we should not let poverty be a barrier to success. Arlington covers AP and IB, International Baccalaureate tests fees for kids. The rest of the Commonwealth does not. And so we worked the numbers with Chev. We realized that, and let's be honest, it's if you have $79 to $125 per test, if you're taking a full raft of AP or IB classes, 6, 7, and you're a family of 4 living at the poverty line, that's impossible. And so you're not getting the benefit of those tests. You're not getting the benefit of that for your college acceptances. You're not getting the benefit of that when you are getting classes that you now have to pay for because you have to take them again. So we gamed it out. It's around $5 million. The idea is that we passed it out of the House and the Senate last year, but we did not get it funded. This year we're going to get it funded. Above-ground chemical storage tanks are not regulated in Virginia. They need to be. We've been working on that for a few years now. Local journalism sustainability, there are approximately 7 major news deserts in Virginia in terms of local and regional press. We've been working on ways to address that. We want to increase the historic rehabilitation tax credit finally because of the amount of good that can do in terms of development and economic development in a lot of our communities around the state. Book banning. In Virginia, we have banned around 400 plus books since in the last 18 months after that insidious and ugly piece of legislation was passed. I'm working with national groups to address that. Safety training for open carry firearms as well as concealed carry, I think is a step we need to take. Also, as something that we've all been talking about, especially today, at the VEER caucus meetings was stretch codes and local options, local flexibility for improving energy efficiency standards as well as climate and building standards. Also, offering leases in languages besides English. I've been working with some of the real estate and apartment folks and they seem neutral on it. So the idea is that you can actually get a lease now in a language besides English in Virginia, and trying to get that done. Best value concepts for construction services. I want to basically codify the resilient Virginia transparency language that actually the governor has done a very good job on. Let's get that in the code and make it permanent. And then local option for, a study just came out that showed that gas leaf blowers are some of the most harmful things you can do for greenhouse gas emissions. And working with another locality that I represent, we're actually thinking about having a local option for localities to regulate the use of gas leaf blowers.
So question, Delia Lopez, if it's such an issue, I assume it not necessarily going to affect a jurisdiction more than another, these environmental issues. Why a local option and not a statewide ban?
Because I'm cognizant of the fact that we have, we have a very small majority. We want to try to move the needle forward and not force something that will not pass. And so we're just trying to be realistic.
Localities the option to ban?
Right. Or regulate, not ban, but regulate.
It says that the language says prohibit or otherwise regulate.
Yeah. So also, we need to do a lot more in terms of incentivizing solar and on unused urban spaces. We also need to, I think, finally make offshore wind, make it deemed in the public interest up to 10,000 megawatts beyond what it's at right now. And then we finally, I think, in one of the big, we need to lift the cap, the 35% cap on power purchase agreements in the Commonwealth. If we can do just some of these things, we can do a great deal of good. And then, like I said, I'll be, there's some other bills, like some of the warranty of habitability, some of the, also have been in conversations, actually I was honored that some of the leaders of the labor community in the state have approached me about carrying a couple fairly significant pieces of labor legislation that we'll announce after we talk to leadership on the House side.
Great. I think you all know your audience. A lot of what you've said excites us on both personal in terms of helping our constituent levels, but also our own political and worldview interest. Since Delegate Patrick Hope cannot be here tonight, in addition to wanting to work on trees, and to be clear, Delegate Hope was not necessarily committing to a regulatory approach to urban forestation. I think he's open to regulatory incentives. Like it's a broader brush. So I want to be very clear about that. And also, he has expressed an interest in expanding the authorities that have been enabled to localities to implement ranked choice voting in elections, taking it beyond the county board races or the Board of Supervisors races to also include other offices as well. He's expressed an interest in doing that. Whether that will result in a bill this year, I do not know, but he wanted me to share that on his behalf. I'll give everybody on the county board a chance to react to anything that you'd like. I'll just say, loved a lot of what I heard from each of you, and I'm not going to regurgitate things, but I am particularly excited to hear the interest from both Delegate-elect McClure and Senator Eben on rebalancing the sort of balance of power between tenants and landlords. And, you know, I think about this, you know, some people hear tenant power and they think a certain way. And I just like to remind people that right now the balance is entirely shifted in the favor of enabling bad actors in the landlord space to exploit and marginalize tenants in ways that not only discriminate against them, deny them their state sanctioned rights, but also create real life health and safety issues, as was referenced earlier. So it's not really about trying to elevate tenants above landlords. It's trying to tip those scales so that tenants aren't so incredibly marginalized. So thank you both for that. Colleagues, any other reactions? Mr. Karantonis.
On the issue of tenants and tenants' rights and rebalancing, right now we are in a almost unprecedented rental crisis, and with regards to the cost of leasing space or leasing a home here. The rents have been extremely high, and we are really concerned about that. This is a byproduct of a chronically undersupplied housing market, and everything we can do in the combined legislative effort to support housing production to alleviate that is critically important. I'm very interested and intrigued to hear that Delegate Lopez works on the issue of the leaf blowers. They are indeed dirty and noisy, especially dirty. I mean, Virginia, just the particulate matter that they emit is positioning Virginia in top 10 of all states in the United States. And this is Northern Virginia in particular. So there is a real harm that comes from all types of traditional fossil fuel-powered gardening equipment, and we have received a lot of advocacy here Of course, enforcing that is extremely difficult. But and I recognize that regulating a product that is available is more of a Commonwealth issue rather than suitable for local jurisdictions. But in absence of Commonwealth fix, a local power would be probably the second best idea.
I just want to note, if we didn't say this explicitly, I want to say it now, there is strong interest in the delegation, and I think there's bipartisan interest in providing whatever tools local governments may need to expand the supply of affordable housing or to help you retain the current affordable housing. So, I mean, we're under the impression that you have the tools you need, but if you want more authority or if you need different types of tools, I please come forward, because I think that these are the kinds of things that we could get passed.
We'll talk. Vice Chair Garvey.
We absolutely will. And
I do want to leave that with you.
Thank you.
I just want to thank you all for coming, and I'm going to be the liaison this year, working with Ms.
good.
Cranen. So anything you need from us, obviously any of us, I think, are willing to help. Come down, testify, suggest somebody who will do something virtually, make a phone call, please let us know. It's great to hear all this, and I'm sitting here thinking, oh yeah, we got the majority. Because when I got on the board, we did not. For a long time. It was pretty grim, so thank you very much. And then Delegate Lopez, I have to thank you for the bill on the AP, paying for the AP testimony. So I was on the school board when we put that in our budget to pay for it with our students. Little did I know, I don't think I realized that we were the first in the state, and I certainly am not aware that we're still the only ones.
One of like two.
Two, yeah, no. So it makes, it's so unfair because those.
Equity issue.
Yeah, no, those folks who have money when they go on to college, because that pays for, like, you can get out of doing college. That's how I got through college in 3.5 years, instead of 4, was because I had the AP credits I could take in, and I needed every single one of those credits to get through, yeah. So it's just, it makes so much sense. So anyway, it was just, that's obviously not the most important thing, I think, in all of that we talked about, but it was kind of an interesting bit for, to kind of follow my own career and think it's kind of cool.
I just want to add my voice to, thanking you all for being such good partners, and your staff are really awesome, and Elaine has been a great addition, and we enjoy working with your senior team, Mark. They're always responsive and always thoughtful, which is good, and they give us very good advice and very good information, which matters a lot in our business. So, thank you
Well, we're a
very
team.
much.
When we work
Quick
together, we're
last
much better. There are a few other
words.
people have a few
Ms.
more words.
Talento and Mr. DiFerranti, if you could wrap us up. Thank you.
I can,
Sure.
go ahead, Tanya.
Oh, okay, great. Well, thank you. I just want to thank everyone for the work that they're doing and that we'll be doing at the General Assembly this year. A lot of my colleagues have echoed a lot of the same priorities that I appreciate. Delegate-elect McClure, if you work on that homeless youth bill, whatever you may be doing that, I would love to talk to you a little bit about our unaccompanied minors and some of the challenges that they face when they are placed with relatives who may not have the paperwork and getting them enrolled in schools, and they just don't qualify right now, or at least didn't when I was on the school board, and they're just an unseen part of our community that a lot of our people who are caring for them face challenges in trying to meet the needs and get them in education. So I'd love to just touch base with you on that offline and just see where you're working on that.
Can I just say that it is related to unaccompanied youth? So let's definitely.
Because that's it's just a very small population that's impacted significantly, and we can talk about that later. But just thank you again for the work that you're doing. I really hope that a lot can be done this year, but I recognize that the majority is slim, and there's going to need to be a lot of compromise. So if there's anything that I can do to support your work in Richmond, please don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you all again.
Thank you, Mr. DiFerranti, for the last word.
Thank you very much. On the jails, I am doing a lot of work on that, and I really, I think I'd like to have a couple of phone calls just to touch base. I'm not, I'm having a meeting Thursday. There's a lot of work that we need to do, but knowing what you're doing at the state level, I just want to touch base on those, because I really appreciate the work there. I'd be interested if there are local gun safety bills that you're interested in, just because that is a piece that I'm thinking about. We have and so if we can follow up, if you have thoughts on that, love to hear from any of the four of you. Thank you. You both are advocates for justice and thoughtful on the practical realities of what we can achieve at this moment, which is a rare combination, and all four of you have it in spades. Thank you.
Can I sneak in one logistical piece?
Oh, of
Really quick?
course.
Okay, I'm really excited to work with everyone this upcoming session. At your seat with the rollout of our new logo, we have new new flags with our new logo on them for you to display in the new General Assembly building in your offices, as well as pins to give out to pages or other constituents that come by. And then finally, we want to get the door plaques that go on your doors updated with the new logo. So as you're unpacking your boxes, if you can just give me your current logo, I'll take them back here and I'll get our facilities to get the new logos in them. So that's all I have for you.
I know the remaining
Thank you.
members of the
Thank you
board
for
will await
this.
the lobby day where they can visit you in your new digs.
Do you guys know what those things are? Do you know what VML and VACO is going to be?
I certainly don't know.
He does. Alana.
Well,
It's not as early as it was last year. It's like in February this year, I think. It's not more like.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Senator Eben.
just wanted to say how much we appreciate Ms. Crennan, and having her enrichment has been a great help to us, and as we develop our agendas. So thank you for having her expertise available to us.
All right, that will officially be the last word. You all
That'll
can
be the last
continue to
word.
talk, but I'm going to close the meeting. Thank you all. We appreciate it.
Thank you.